right, Mark Ogden, time to do another one of our keep and dumps. We're going to be focusing on Liverpool. What do you think, Mark? Should we remind everybody about the basic ground rules here?
Well, I think it would be a shame not to, because that's the big part of the show, isn't it? When Gab talks through the rules, so fire away.
All right. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to pretend that we are Michael Edwards and Julian Ward. Mark, you can be Michael Edwards since you look more like him, and I'll be Julian Ward. And essentially, we're going to try to think what we think Liverpool should do, and obviously this will take into account with their personnel. This will obviously take into account everything from their performances, yes, but also the club's financial situation, salaries, extensions, what the club's priorities are, that kind of thing. So it's not just this guy's good, this guy's bad. If you like, maybe we'll do that another time. So looking at this, Mark, obviously the big thing that Edwards and Ward have to deal with, and Richard Hughes is coming in as the, I think he's got the title of sporting director, but it's effectively just trifecta, kind of making personnel decisions together with the new manager, Arne Slot, is kind of how do they navigate sort of post Klopp, right? Because you have a new manager, he's got some things in common with Klopp, others are going to be different, others maybe unknown. Top down, I think when we wrote the piece, I think you suggested this is going to be kind of a rebalancing. What do you mean here?
Well, you've got some big decisions. You've got certainly three very big decisions. You've got Salah, Virgil van Dijk, and Trent Alexander-Arnold have all got a year left on the contract. It's a case of working out what to do with those at the same time as accepting you've got a massive change managerially. So the upheaval, the disruption of Klopp leaving, Slot coming in is a big one. So what you don't want at the same time is to lose one of your big players. You know, you don't really want to lose Salah, Van Dijk, or Alexander-Arnold when you just lost the manager. But there may have to be a case where one of them does go, because I will get into later on. Do you give new contracts to all three of those players? Well, maybe two, maybe three, maybe one, but different age groups, different positions in the team. So they've got to do this rebalancing at the same time as integrating a new manager and reintegrating the technical staff who you mentioned, Michael Edwards, Julian Ward, and Richard Hughes. So two of those have been there before. They've come back. Richard Hughes arrives from Bournemouth. So there's a lot of upheaval at Liverpool this summer. So it's how much upheaval they want to add to the team and the playing squad, and that's what we're discussing.
I think there's also a sense that, as you mentioned, Edwards and Ward were together with Klopp, part of this group that sort of built the successful title-winning, Champions League-winning Liverpool side. They left, Klopp stayed. Without question, I think Slot, at least initially, will have a lot less power and a lot less influence than Klopp did in these last couple of years, because I presume this is part of the reason why Edwards and Ward came back with fancier titles, and also obviously Slot hasn't achieved, certainly not at Liverpool, what Jurgen Klopp has. In terms of positions worth strengthening, I think overall, and we're going to run through this kind of department by department, but defensive midfield is one where we both feel that you need to find some sort of solution. Wataru Endo was brought in, but I think he felt to many of us like a stopgap. Alexis McAllister played there relatively well for part of the season, but that's not his real position. There may be other players as well that you can raise some money by moving them on. So let's dive in. And one of those players, just taking a look at the goalkeeping situation, obviously Alisson is locked up until 2027. Mm-hmm. Immediately, one big call that needs to be made is with Quaveen Kelleher, simply because he's 25 years old. His deal ends in 2026. He played a lot last year when Alisson was injured. He's very, very good. This is the stage where, if you're going to keep him, you have to extend him. But equally, it's going to depend what Kelleher wants to do, right?
Yeah, and I think he's come out recently and said that he knows he's got a decision to make because, you know, he's at that age now where he's playing regular, as you say, and I think he wants to move on. I think there was a chance in January to go to Nottingham Forest. Forest didn't meet Liverpool's valuation, but if he stays at Liverpool, he's going to have to accept that once again he's going to be number 2 to Alisson, and Alisson isn't that old. He's quite a young goalkeeper. He's got a lot of time ahead of him. So I would imagine that unless the rumours of a Saudi Arabian move for Alisson Becker come off, and I don't think they will, then Kelleher's going to have to think, am I going to be number 2 or, you know, pursue a move elsewhere? And I think he's now earned the right to play somewhere else. It's whether Liverpool will put a price tag on him, I guess, a valuation that makes it feasible for him to leave. Because as we've discussed and others, we've got several goalkeepers this summer that are available at different clubs in a similar position to Kelleher. Aaron Ramsdale at Arsenal being one. Yeah. So, you know, maybe or at City. So there's going to be a kind of a crowded market for number 2 goalkeepers ready to make the step up. So yes, he needs to leave, but what he would find as an option may not be what he wants. So that's a difficult one for Kelleher.
That's a great point. There's only so many number 1 jobs out there, though. I think again you have to take a look at the market, take a look at options, and make a decision. I think with him. Moving on to the defenders. If we take, all right, well, let's deal with the elephant or the Virgil in the room. Virgil van Dijk has a year left on his deal. He's been so important. He's had a really good season last year as well. He makes an enormous amount of money. Look, I think we're all in agreement on this. We keep him until his contract expires. You do not extend him. You can have the conversation if he does well, if he's happy, if he wants to stay. Maybe he takes a pay cut. We can have a conversation later on. Maybe Arne Slot wants to keep him, but I think Van Dijk has earned the right to kind of write his own ticket at this stage. But equally, from the club's perspective, you don't need to give him more years. We're in agreement on this, right? You take your chances with him as a free agent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it suits both parties. Right. It suits Liverpool just to, you know, protect against the risk. But for Van Dijk as well, as much as he'd like a new 4-year contract, he's not going to get it. So he knows that if he sits it out, he'll either get a new contract to Liverpool next summer, or he can take many options that will be available to him for a free transfer and a big signing on fee. So both parties work on this one.
Perfect. Now, just looking at the centre back core as a whole, we've got Ibrahima Konate. He's somebody that they're going to need to spend money on to extend because he's got 2 years left on his deal. He's 24 years old. He dropped off a bit in the second half of the season, but he's your starter. And when he's good, he's very, very good. I think, and stop me if you disagree on that one. You have Jarell Quansah as well, who came on well. This is kind of your core of central defenders. And you've got Joe Gomez, who can obviously step in there. Matip is gone. We're okay with these 4 center backs, right, as a group?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Quansah is definitely a player that's got a big future. Right. So I think they're looking good in that department.
Now comes the interesting thing. Over at left back, I think we have, obviously you've got Andy Robertson. We disagree on whether we need to keep Tsimikas to back him up. But first on Robertson, actually, he's 30 years old. His deal expires in 2026. Mm-hmm. Do we need to extend him, or do we need to bide our time a little bit?
Yeah, I'd wait. I think you can wait until next summer for Andy Robertson. He's been a great servant, but you don't have to. You'd have to panic 2 years out before a 30-year-old left back needs a new contract. So I think they're fine to sit it out, and in the meantime, look for a long-term successor, because that is going to have to be a realistic option at some point in the next 2 or 3 years, finding someone to replace him.
Yeah, the only way I disagree a little bit is I want to see this is something where you need to talk to Arne Slot, maybe 6 months in, about how he feels about Robertson. The only reason you might choose to extend him a year is that to preserve his transfer value, so that next summer, he would be 31. And if you want to move him on, if he wants to move on, you can still get a good transfer fee for him, because I think a fit Andy Robertson is still worth decent coin. Now, the interesting thing, and with his reserve, obviously I'm a big Konstantinos Tsimikas fan. He's 28. He's got a deal expiring in 2027. My take is do nothing, because he's a different profile, gives you different things than Robertson. You'd like to move him on because you don't like him. Sorry, no, just kidding.
No, I think he wants to move on. I think he's wanted to play. And I think he knows that Robertson plays every week when he's fit. So I think Tsimikas wants to get a move and play regularly, because he's he's been a bit part player at Liverpool, and that is understandable. But I think he wants to move on and find something new. And I think you can play Joe Gomez at left back. He's played there before, so in the immediate term, there's not really a big issue of letting Tsimikas go.
All right, looking at the right back position, I think we both agree that the right back of the future is there in Connor Bradley. We both really like him. He's got a deal to 2027. He's 20 years old. You don't need to extend him now, although obviously it's a conversation we're going to want to have in the next year. The big question is Trent Alexander-Arnold. He's 25 years old. His deal expires, as we said, in 2025. He's somebody who can play in midfield. We just recently saw him play in midfield for England. It's where he started out. People are going to point out his defensive deficiencies. This is a huge, huge call that needs to be made on him because he's mid-career. If you don't extend him, you really risk losing him for nothing. If you shift him this summer, you put weight on Connor Bradley. If you extend him, you know, he's going to be one of the club's highest earners for the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big one because, you know, Alexander-Arnold is a player that's very specific to the manager that he's playing for. So he's had 2 managers in his career, really. He's had Klopp at Liverpool and he's had Gareth Southgate with England. Now, Klopp, as we know, loves Alexander-Arnold, thinks he's one of the world's best right backs. Has tried him in midfield a little bit, but not to the extent where you'd think that he's got a long-term role under Klopp at right back, but obviously Klopp's gone. Southgate doesn't rate him as a right back. Tried him as a midfielder against Bosnia this week, recently. I think he did okay, but I don't think Alexander-Arnold is a midfielder that you would build your midfield around. So this one's on Arne Slot. Arne Slot has to decide if Alexander-Arnold is a player that has got a future under his system, where it is, and if he's only going to be a second or third option in midfield, or Connor Bradley's emerging at right back, Slot might think, do you know something? I need some money to rebuild this team, and he might be.
What do we think? We are Edwards and Ward. We got to tell him, hey, Slotty, you gotta take a dump or get off the pot here, because you have to give yourself a time frame on this, because otherwise he's potentially leave on a free market. You have to talk to the player. You have to understand. I think we're in agreement on this. We got to, maybe you go back to the nerds, the analytics people, and you decide based on input from Slot. But by a certain date, you say, all right, Trent. And then maybe that date is mid-August. Who knows? Maybe it's later. But you got to say, Trent, this is what we can pay you for you to stay if you want to stay. If you want to look elsewhere, fine. But this is what we can pay you, and you're not getting a new deal. And we're going to try to shift you if you turn this deal down, and kind of leverage the fact that he's not going to want to spend his final year at Anfield, kind of running his contract down so he can leave on a free, like Steve McMahon did, something like that. I mean, I think you have to be a little bit ruthless. I cannot expect Slot to have an opinion on him yet because he hasn't seen how the other pieces fit together. But I would assume that's got to be something. And I'd also assume that you'd have a pretty good market out there, even with 1 year left, in the right system. I think there's a lot of clubs that would rate him.
Yeah, I take your point, but I think he's got a limited market where he goes to, because he would command a decent fee, would command decent wages. And I think you're probably talking about Real Madrid, PSG, maybe Bayern Munich, great clubs to go to, but have they got the opening for him? Do they want him? Were they going to pay for him? So he may not have that same. He may not have a list of options. So I think
you mentioned these foreign clubs. You just take it as read that there's no way that Trent would go to another club in the Premier League.
No, I just don't see it happening. I just don't see, not a chance. I don't think he would
want to, because he's Liverpool born and bred. He wouldn't want to somehow betray the cause, something like that.
Yeah, you might mock that, Gav, but I think that is a genuine thing. I think that is a real.
I'm not mocking it.
I think that's a real thing. Look, I mean, he ain't going to go to Man City. He definitely isn't going to go to Man United.
You're just rattling out these teams. Why? Because they're English clubs. Because I think, honestly, if I'm looking at
because there's a rivalry factor.
I think Manchester City could use him. I think Arsenal could use him if you're going to play defensive left back.
Because
I think all these clubs could use him. So you're just saying no.
Yeah, because there's a rivalry factor that maybe diminishes the margin, but it certainly, I can't remember the last time any player went from Liverpool to Man United. Liverpool to Man City, no chance. Not with the rivalry that's built up. City got Kyle Walker, so I don't see that. And what is it?
You don't remember Raheem Sterling, yeah?
that's different. He wasn't born and bred Liverpool.
He's a Londoner. That's right.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Right.
I didn't have the
All right,
connection.
right.
So
you
anyway,
may be right.
Back to the
even
point.
with those clubs,
Yeah,
even with
I
those
think,
clubs, right?
Yeah, I think Liverpool say, take your time, think about the summer, but mid-August you need to tell us what you're doing, and if you're not going to sign a contract, we might have to move you on.
Right, and obviously he then at that point he could get aggressive and he would turn them down and think, fine, but then I'm going to become a free agent and I decide where I want to go, and maybe a year from now he can sign for Real Madrid, he can sign for Barcelona. I mean, I think there is a big market for him out there, which is what makes this situation so tricky.
And all that is right, but that would damage his reputation with the fans. And I think for a kid who was born and bred Liverpool, is the guy that they sing about, is the scout of the team. I think that matters.
You think McManaman's reputation with the fans has been damaged irreparably?
Yeah, that's. I think if you ask Steve himself, he would say that it was never quite as close as it was. Michael Owen the same, in a similar situation, slightly different situation, but still, But anyway, our view is probably it's so long ago that those two moved. So I think we talk about the present day.
Exactly, we're really dating ourselves here.
Absolutely, people are googling these players now. Alexander-Arnold won't leave Liverpool for a rival club in the Premier League. So, but I do think that he also can't risk his reputation being sullied by bringing down his contract. So, I think August is a big time for Liverpool and Alexander-Arnold.
Okay, that's a lot of Trent Alexander-Arnold talk. Let's move on now to midfield. First, what I find interesting about this group is that there's two guys who I think are just easy straight keeps, and those are the two signings from last year, Szoboszlai and McAllister. What I find interesting is there's a trio of players there who are all young. They're all, I think, talented. All have a high upside. But there's only 3 midfield spots, presuming he's going to play 4-3-3. And one of them won't go to these players, presumably, we think, because he's going to want a defensive midfield specialist. Those 3 guys are Ryan Gravenberch, Harvey Elliott, and Curtis Jones. Mm-hmm. So if we imagine Szoboszlai and McAllister starting in midfield, and the third slot going to a defensive midfielder who could be a new signing, it could be some combination of Endo and Stefan Bajcetic, who we both really, really like, who's coming back after a really long injury. He's only 19, but he can grow into the position. I'm just wondering, how do you find the minutes to keep Elliott, Jones, and Gravenberch, happy and productive and involved?
Well, I think Elliott, you can play further forward. I think you can play him in a 3 at the front 3. I think he enjoys it.
Or you could play Szoboszlai there too, but there's a lot of numbers up front too, so we'll get to that.
Curtis Jones, I think Curtis Jones can develop into more defensive midfielder. I think he's got that ability. I think he's got the energy, the tenacity for it. I think the loser could be Gravenberch. I don't think he had a great season last year. He came on a decent fee, but I don't think he lived up to the hype that surrounded him. And obviously, people say, well, Slot will know him, he's Dutch. Doesn't really matter. He struggled last year. I think I don't see him moving Gravenberch on, but I do think he's the one that is the most vulnerable in that group of players, because I think Jones and Elliott, they're young enough to, obviously Gravenberch as well, but obviously being English players, I think they're more prepared to sit around and play. But I think Elliott will play. I think Jones will play. Gravenberch, I think he needs to up his game, basically.
I'm not, but the question here isn't who will play. The question is here, if you need to monetize somebody to strengthen positions elsewhere, would you be prepared to sacrifice one of these 3 people? And bearing in mind, you may not have been impressed with Gravenberch last season, but he just signed a year ago.
Yeah, well, that's it.
If you tell him, it's going to be really, really hard to not take a loss on him, right?
Yeah. So he'd be the one I'd move on, but you're right. The financial numbers don't stack up because he came in on a decent fee last year, but he's the one that was the least impressive last year.
So it would be Elliott, who you've amortized.
Yeah.
Or it would potentially be Curtis Jones. Now, the two, I love Elliott's versatility. If I were voting for Liverpool Player of the Year last year, even though he came off the bench so many times, I might give it to Harvey Elliott. It may be, if you have to make a tough decision, it may end up being Curtis Jones, because also his deal is up in 2027, like Elliott's, but he is 2 years older. And then you'll be in the situation where you have to extend him next year. If you do end up bringing in a defensive midfielder, then all of a sudden the numbers just don't add up. So maybe, just maybe, this may be one where you have to consider an offer.
And also with Curtis Jones, a homegrown player. So if you get 25, 30 million for him, that's pure profit on PSR rules. So that helps balance the books and it helps the wheels turn. But I'd be reluctant to let him go.
So would I. It's just that it's a numbers game. They got themselves in this weird situation which is good, but they have, I think, even with European commitments and everything, they do have an situation of abundance. There's a defensive midfield position. Endo and Basetic, can you go through a season with those two, one of those two playing, plus McAllister when you need them to play in that position? Possibly, but here it's almost like, to me, it's a technical decision which the coach needs to make. If he feels he needs somebody who can be, a long-term specialist upgrade in that position, whoever you like, a Fabinho, a more traditional Fabinho type, and he doesn't think Basetic is ready, then that's where you strike. For me, I would be tempted to put my resources elsewhere and have a go with Endo and Basetic in that role. Other midfielders, just here quickly in the book, obviously Thiago Alcantara is leaving. We saw that didn't go great. We're shifting Fabio Carvalho, who I don't think you're going to get a fee for him or a significant fee. Maybe you don't want to get. He's only still in 21. Maybe you want to loan him. We debate that. Bobby Clark's another one where you're not going to be able to get in the minutes if these guys all stay. So loan him, let him grow somewhere else. Moving on to the forwards here. This is where it gets interesting. Let's start immediately with Mohamed Salah. He's 31. He'll expires next summer. It is a Van Dijk situation. Again, I think we're in agreement. You say, Mo, we're not going to discuss a new contract with you. We can discuss this later in the year. You can decide what you want. Do you want to move as a free agent? Do you want to stay here? Then we can discuss extensions. There's no point in pressuring him into a new deal at this stage. You just kind of ride it out. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think both parties, again, it's best for them to sit tight and see what happens. So, and then you get to the summer, and I think I think Mo Salah's a better long-term bet than Van Dijk, but you can't make that call right now. And he might not want to be around next year. He might want to use his free agency as a way to get a huge deal from somewhere else. Saudi Arabia being the obvious one.
Well, we both love Luis Diaz. In fact, I think you might have called him Liverpool's most important player after Salah. I think he's fantastic.
Yeah.
Diogo Jota is obviously somebody you keep. And this Ben Doak, who you like a lot, we would loan out because he's only 18 years old. And that brings up Darwin Núñez and Cody Gakpo. I want to start with Núñez first. For me, unless Arne Slot says, yeah, he's my guy, I absolutely love him, I think you move him on. And the reason you move him on is, look, you got to put a number on it, and you have to make it clear to him why, what the number is and so on. And it may not be a huge number because people can watch his highlight film and they know the season he had. I think there is a market for him. I just think I don't know that for the resources invested in him, I don't know that he's made the grade. And if you can make the residual value back and maybe invest in somebody else, possibly Santi Jimenez, who obviously worked with Slot at Feyenoord, I think you got to make that call. Yeah,
I mean, Darwin Núñez as well. He was very much a Jurgen Klopp signing. He was a guy that Klopp really wanted and pushed the club into signing. He was really impressed with him when Liverpool played Benfica in the Champions League a couple of years ago. And they basically bought him on the back of two performances, backed up by the data as well. But it was a Klopp-driven move. So the technical people at Liverpool have no real loyalty to Darwin Núñez. And I think, you like say, he hasn't learned the offside rule yet. He doesn't score enough goals. He does make things happen every now and again, but he's just not going to play. He faded out of the team at the end of last season, and he'll be on decent wages. But I think you'll be able to find somebody in Italy, in Turkey, maybe, that will take him and pay those wages. So,
but you're talking wages, fine, but you're talking fee?
No,
I would only move him on for a fee. I would not.
No, I think you loan him out. I don't think anybody's going to pay money for him. I don't think anybody at this stage is going to, come up with a 40, 50 million pound transfer fee for Darwin Núñez.
All right. I mean, I'd be reluctant. I mean, unless you can sell somebody else to raise the money to get his replacement, and then you loan him somewhere. I'd feel uncomfortable if I didn't get a fee on him.
I think Gab as well. I think one thing is important as well. Obviously, we've mentioned Saudi Arabia 2 or 3 times in this, but I don't think either of us are massively convinced that the money train is going to be as productive as it was last summer. A lot of people are thinking about different players at different clubs. Oh well, he can go to Saudi Arabia. I don't know whether they've got the slots in the teams or the will to do so many deals this year. So Darwin Núñez could be an option for a move to Saudi Arabia because, you know, big players would prefer to go for the money. But I just don't think it's one that's option to him.
No, I agree with you. I listen. This time last year, all we talked about every single day was Saudi this and that. Right now it's June. Who's the biggest player being linked to Saudi Arabia right now? Who? Luis Alberto? Who? Nobody. So
it's Casemiro, and again, some of the numbers I've been seen linked with him have been ridiculous. They're not going to pay 100 million euros for Casemiro.
So I think you want to. I don't think anybody can count on that for the reasons that you cited earlier. Gakpo is somebody who I think improved a lot over the course of the season. I don't think he's a great player, but he's a willing player. He works hard. I think if you can't move Núñez, maybe you can move Gakpo. Again, obviously with slots, agreement, and whatever. Simply because he is more versatile. He can play different positions. And when I look at the number of forwards, and okay, Salah might just be for 1 year. Again, Salah, Gakpo, Jota, Luis Diaz, Núñez. And you've got those 2 other guys, Harvey Elliott and Szoboszlai, who can have played in the front 3. I don't need to have these many options up front. So I do think it's important. I'm not saying you need to move both of them, Núñez and Gakpo, but if I can raise some coin by moving Gakpo, if he's not going to be a starter in Slot's plans or so on, I think he's somebody that you could look to move on, and then you could look to bring in Darwin's long-term replacement, if that's what you feel that you need.
Yeah, I think one or both of those could be moved on. Let's wait and see. But I would definitely move on Núñez and Gakpo as well. If keep Gakpo, but if you get an offer, then take it, because, like you say, I don't think he's like top level for Liverpool. I think they could do without both those players if needed to.
And I think what's exciting, if you're Liverpool or if you're Edwards and Ward, who we tried to impersonate for the last 28 minutes or so, is that you are moving kind of towards more of a blank canvas here, right? You can shape the club more because Klopp is no longer there. So you don't need to necessarily defer to him in the way you did before. Your 2 highest earners, Salah and Van Dijk, are going to move on in a year's time. So you're going to have much more flexibility in terms of wages in the very, very near future. You do have this enormous, and you do have a core of players who have a market. We mentioned some of the forwards there. We mentioned that Elliott, Jones, Gravenberch triumvirate in midfield. I think they could do with possibly picking up another central defender, maybe a younger one, if somebody they like arises, simply because Joe Gomez backing up, every position at the back 4 seems like a lot. But there are a ton of possibilities. I do think a lot of it starts with your decision on Alexander-Arnold, because if Trent stays, how he's used is going to impact how you want to fit the other pieces around him.
Yeah, I mean, and my view on that is I would take a cold decision on that now and decide to move him on, but I think you have to give him the option or the right to consider it himself, because he's got attributes, but I think he ticks a lot of boxes in terms of moving on, because new coach coming in, decent right back coming through. I don't think he'd be a starter in a top class midfield. So it's only emotion that's keeping Alexander-Arnold at the club right now in terms of going forward. So he does hold the key to a lot of things. Unless Slot really, really wants him, I think you move him on.